Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be testing out a strategy used at a Pokemon Go Regional Championship to see if it can provide me positive results in Go Battle League. The strategy that I'm using was created by Onion Frank, and it was used at the most recent Toronto Regionals. He employed a team featuring ARCTIBAX, and he used ARCTIBAX to force switch advantage, and then ran a heavily alignment-dependent backline. So for the team, I'm running ARCTIBAX on the lead, and then two Pokemon that he himself used in the back, Carbink and Medicham, which are extremely powerful in the correct alignment. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's check out the team in action. Hopping into the first match, picking up a positive lead, ARCTIBAX into Sableye. I'm farming up energy with the ARCTIBAX. I build up to the Avalanche, and I'm firing off the Dragon Claw. ARCTIBAX does win all even shields versus Sableye, so when my opponent shields, I can very comfortably shield back. The nice thing is ARCTIBAX does win CMP over the Sableye as well, so I can throw the Dragon Claw as soon as I get it, and this is a CMP tie to their foul play. Dragon Claw will secure the KO. Opponent sends in a Powder Snow Alolan Sandslash, and I am not going to switch out because I have an extremely hard counter to Alolan Sandslash in the back with my Medicham. So instead, I'm just going to stay in. My opponent has to throw a move or I would have made it to another Dragon Claw, and now I have the alignment that I'm looking for. Medicham onto the Sandslash. In the back, opponent has a Shadow Venusaur, which is a bit tricky for this back line, but now that I have an energy lead on the Medicham, I just simply win the game. I land the Ice Punch, I can send in the Carbink, and Carbink will be able to get the Venusaur low enough that I can just win the game with the Medicham. Venusaur doesn't even make it to its next charge move. My opponent will fire off a move from this Alolan Sandslash, but it's not really going to do much for them, as one counter from the Medicham will secure the win. I see a great lead in the next match, ARCTIBAX going up against Superior. My opponent save switches into Sableye, so I can farm up to a Dragon Claw and then send in Sableye's worst nightmare, Carbink. Carbink is going to be able to withstand all this damage from Sableye, and my plan here is to farm all the way down. This way, I have energy stored on the ARCTIBAX for later, and I'm going to have a bunch of energy on the Carbink as well. My opponent is going to fire off one final charge move. They do make it to the foul play, but unfortunately, it just really doesn't do a lot of damage, and now I can continually apply pressure with the Carbink. Moonblast is able to connect. I'm farming up energy with the Carbink. Opponent is going to fire off their energy here, and I'm just going to let this through. Frenzy Plant will secure the KO. Back in comes ARCTIBAX in the back. It's a Alolan Sandslash. This is a really unfortunate alignment for my opponent, as once they lost the lead, unfortunately, their backline was just hard countered by mine. But again, that's part of the reason why I did want to try running the ARCTIBAX lead, is ARCTIBAX, at least in the ELO bracket that I was in, does pretty well against a lot of common leads. Hopping into the next match, leading ARCTIBAX into Lickitung. Lickitung is the master of neutral matchups, which is why it may come as a bit of a surprise that ARCTIBAX does actually win all evens. And I can do so just going straight Dragon Claw. I'm going to farm up a massive amount of energy with the ARCTIBAX, go for the Dragon Claw, and that will connect. I'm going for Dragon Claw number 2, and this will be on the CMP tie. My Dragon Claw will not KO the Lickitung, but their Body Slam also will not KO me. This is going to come down to a race of fast moves, but as long as you have a decent rank ARCTIBAX, ARCTIBAX is barely able to win that. And now that I have alignment, they have a Sableye, and I get to put that onto my Carbink. And this is a thoroughly miserable situation to be in for Sableye. It doesn't matter what they throw, everything is going to be resisted. Opponent fires off the return. In the back, they have Shadow Alolan Sandslash, and the poor Sandslash gets absolutely deleted by the Medicham. Again, ARCTIBAX being able to win a lot of those matchups comes in clutch, and here I'm actually going to go for the Psychic. Psychic is heavily resisted, but they're shielding no matter what, so I may as well go for the debuff. Unfortunately, I do not get the debuff, but at this point, this is just a very comfortable win for the Carbink. Opponent is going to fire off the foul play. I can tank this. At this point, honestly, I had forgotten that they had used a shield. I could have just thrown the double rock slide, but in my head, I thought they still had 2 shields remaining, so I end up farming all the way down. I see a bit of a tricky lead in the next match, ARCTIBAX into Dugong. This is a battle of neutral damage. ARCTIBAX is the Dragon Ice type, so the Icy Winds and the Ice Shards from the Dugong are going to hit for neutral. However, due to Dugong being a debuffer, that does make this so this is a slightly negative matchup. Opponent shields the first move, and that's honestly perfect for me, as now I'm just not going to shield my ARCTIBAX. I'm going to fire off Dragon Claws, but if my opponent tries to go for a farm down here, I should be able to make it to another Claw. Dugong. Their health is rapidly disappearing. I go for the Dragon Claw, but the opponent makes a nice catch, catching onto Kofagrigus. And man, am I happy to see the Kofagrigus going up against the Carbink and not going up against the Medicham, as of course that would completely shred Medicham. My opponent is going to fire off the Shadow Ball. That does some solid damage. I'm going to farm up 5 Rock Throws and go for the Rock Slide. They are now 1 off of the Shadow Ball. I'm counting on the fact that the Rock Slide, if it doesn't KO, then the Rock Throw after will. Back in comes Dugong. Dugong should be 2 Ice Shards off the back-to-back, so I can shield up the Drill Run and then get the farm down. I should be in a pretty good spot here, but I definitely am not since they have a Runorigus in the back. I was saying, Carbink and Medicham do form a very nice core, but the opponent running some extreme spice, they have Runorigus, and I basically just lose. This is extremely tough. I no longer have the ARCTIBAX that I would need to win this game. In comes the Medicham. I have to try and predict the catch. I farm up, switch, and get the catch onto the ARCTIBAX. Is it the Shadow Ball? It is, and maybe I have a chance. Oh my goodness, Medicham farming up energy. We're going to see another charge move thrown by the Runorigus. I shield at the last second, and shielding that Shadow Ball will mean that against all odds, I will actually win this game, as I'm able to make it to the back-to-back Ice Punches here. Ice Punch is going to secure the knockout onto the Runorigus, and I win a game that honestly I had no business winning. Tough leads continue in the next match. ARCTIBAX into Azumarill. ARCTIBAX is walled, so I will actually have to switch out of the lead. My opponent is now going to send Gligar into the Carbink safe switch. Carbink being up energy honestly means that this is not a terrible spot to be in. Opponent goes for the dig, but their wing attacks do absolutely nothing to Carbink. I'm going to massively overfarm and then go for the Rock Slide. Rock Slide will hit for neutral damage into the Gligar. Gligar commits the shield. I go for the Rock Slide. I lose CMP. Will I be able to tank a dig here? This is super effective damage, and the Carbink refuses to get KO'd, able to make it to 1 final charge move. Rock Slide gets them low. They're going to be able to farm me down, but now I can go for some energy on the ARCTIBAX. This should only be enough for an Aerial Ace, so I am just going to let that through, go for the farm down, and trust in the fact that my Medicham can do okay into Azumarill. In comes the Azu. I send in the Medi. Azu is going to stay in here and go for the Play Rough. Play Rough would hit for big super effective damage, so I will commit the shield. I'm farming up energy with my Medicham. In the back, my opponent has their own Medi. And I'm running pretty interesting IVs on my Medicham. This qualifies as a Mirror Slayer Medicham, so against high rank Medicham, my counters actually do 1 more damage to them than theirs do to me. Psychic is going to do less than a super effective Play Rough, so I am going to let that through, and now I can go for the Psychic. I've done enough damage that Psychic should be enough to get the KO here, and it does. In comes the Azumarill. I'm farming up, and I'm going for the Psychic. I need a Psychic to land to potentially put it close to Avalanche range. Psychic is able to connect. Medicham not going to make it to the Psychic, only enough for the Ice Punch. How well was my opponent keeping track of energy? They shield the Ice Punch. In comes the ARCTIBAX. And I believe I can win this. Avalanche does slightly under 25%. I'm farming up with the ARCTIBAX, but I miscounted. I thought they had 1 less bubble than they did. If I threw the Avalanche on CMP, I think I just win that game. That is a tremendous throw on my part. Moving to the next match, picking up a favorable lead for ARCTIBAX as it leads into Kofagrigus. My opponent save switches into Vigoroth. I send in the Medicham, but this immediately has me worried. The fact that they have such a dominant counter to Medicham on the lead, plus the Vigoroth save switch, makes me think that this is a bait out. They're trying to lure out the Medicham to hopefully let whatever they have in back sweep. Opponent goes for the Bulldoze there at the end. Bulldoze does incrementally more damage than a Body Slam. Of course, it's way less efficient. I should have the Psychic plus the Ice Punch here to deal some nice damage onto the Kofagrigus, and then if possible, I would love to be able to save my Medi. Ice Punch will connect. I send in the Carbink in the back. It's a Shadow Poliwrath. And even worse, it's running Power Up Punch. Opponent is just going to go straight for Power Up Punch, buffing up their attack more and more and more. I farm up to the Moonblast. I'm baiting with the Rock Slide, but I do lose CMP. And I'm in serious danger of getting swept by a Shadow Poliwrath. I fire off the Rock Slide bait. Rock Slide will be shielded by my opponent. I continue to farm up with the Carbink. Opponent just going straight for the Power Up Punch, and this gives me an opportunity. I can make it to the rock slide. If they no-shield the rock slide, I can Dragon Breath down with the ARCTIBAX, but if they shield, then I can potentially do this. I send in the ARCTIBAX, the boosted counter shredding through its HP, but I make the Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw secures the KO. In comes the Kofagrigus. Kofagrigus gets the farm down, but they pay a heavy price. In comes the Carbink. Carbink KOs the Kofagrigus, and with the 1 HP Medi in the back, that's a win. I see a terrible lead in the next match, ARCTIBAX into Alolan Sandslash. The goal of the team is kind of just to have ARCTIBAX win alignment whenever possible, so losing a lead this hard definitely makes it tough. I save switch into the Carbink, I shield up a Drill Run, opponent now sends in a Shadow Gligar, but since I have so much energy on the Carbink, this is honestly not a bad spot to be in. I bait with the Rock Slide, I get the shield, I know I can live a Shadow Dig, so I immediately no shield, and if I can make it to a Rock Slide will not KO, so my opponent might let this go, and if they do, I can play for switch. Opponent no shields the Rock Slide, but now I'm going to go for the 1 shield farm down play as the Carbink winning switch, so that way I can put the Medicham onto the Alolan Sandslash in the endgame. And then hopefully ARCTIBAX can do well into their final Pokemon now that I've won switch. My opponent, they're thinking about it. They send in the final Mon. It's a Azumarill, and I suddenly have massive regret over playing for switch advantage, as now my ARCTIBAX doesn't really have anywhere to go. So I'm just going to send in the ARCTIBAX to get KO'd. Opponent banks a move on the Azu, and they send back in the Sandslash. Sandslash will be hit with the Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw doesn't do a lot, but the Dragon Breaths, for being resisted damage, they're adding up quite a bit onto the Sandslash. Sandslash goes for the Ice Punch. That only hits for neutral. I make it to another Dragon Claw. This will not KO, but it will get them deep into the red. Opponent shields the Sandslash, not knowing what I have in the back. And now this sets me up to be able to win this game, as this Ice Punch will get the KO, but I can send in the Medicham, counters, secure the knockout. In comes the Azumarill. I'm farming up energy with the Medicham. Switch and the catch onto the Carbink as well. Let's go. And now my opponent will go for an undercharge to try and get a little bit of extra energy, even though I am running a Medi Slayer Medi, so I am definitely lacking in bulk compared to standard Medichams. I am still able to absorb this Play Rough. Medicham will be able to absorb this damage, no problem, get the counter down, and despite the terrible lead, we win another game. Moving to the next match, leading ARCTIBAX into Defense Deoxys. This is a bit of an interesting lead. My opponent hits for super effective damage with counter, but of course Thunderbolt not going to do a whole lot, as it is resisted due to the dragon typing. I'm staying in here, going for the Avalanche. That does massive damage. I try and go for a catch onto the Carbink. Opponent able to hold on to their energy, and now they send in Gligar. So far, Carbink, when I have had to switch out, has done a pretty decent job at baiting out Gligar. I'm farming up energy with the Carbink, and I decide to full send the Moonblast here. Moonblast definitely going to hurt. Opponent is going to no shield. Unfortunately, switch advantage doesn't really do a lot for me here, as there's still a Deoxys with a ton of energy, so I just decide to let this go. My opponent lets themselves get as low as possible to minimize the amount of farm for the ARCTIBAX. That's a pretty nice play by my opponent. And here, what I should have done was just let the ARCTIBAX go and trust in Medicham up energy. But as you're going to see, I end up making the mistake of trusting in the ARCTIBAX, and in the back, they have a Shadow Gliscor with a Medicham in the back. I do not have a win con, and I resign the match. Picking up a positive lead in the final match, ARCTIBAX into Pelipper, and the opponent is staying in this matchup. I only win the Zero Shield if I land an Avalanche, so I am going to go straight for it. Dragon Claw will not KO here. Opponent respects it with a shield. They have a ton of energy. They can bait and make it to a Hurricane. I shielded the last second. Unfortunately, they are going to be able to get both of my shields, but for me, it feels worth it, as that way I can get the alignment that I need for the Carbink and the Medicham. So I will be able to get the farm down. Opponent now going to send in Registeel. And this is a bit unfortunate. I'm going to be firing off the Avalanche. Avalanche is going to be hitting for resisted damage onto the Registeel, but as you can see, the Avalanche plus the Dragon Breaths are adding up. Avalanche is going to connect Registeel almost in the red health purely off of resisted damage, and they're forced to throw a 75 energy Focus Blast to get the KO. In comes the Medicham looking for the farm down. Opponent switches out at the last second, and they have Superior in the back. So Superior, a bit of an awkward Pokemon for this backline to see. I go for the Ice Punch. Opponent will commit the shield. I'm going for Ice Punch number 2. Ice Punch will hit for super effective damage, but from Medicham, it does not do a lot of damage. I tank any one move here, so I am going to let this through. Opponent is going to go for the Frenzy Plant. Unfortunately, I try and go for the switch there. The switch does not queue, so I just stay in. They're actually running Leaf Tornado on the Superior, and this could get interesting. The question is, can Registeel make it to a move versus the Carbink? Registeel is extremely low. Frenzy Plant connects. In comes the Registeel. They do not make the move, and we take the win. And now let's look at the results. I was battling in the 3100s, and I went 8-4 with the team. I feel like it could have been 9-3 if I went for that Avalanche versus the Azumarill. So overall, did go very positive when trying it. Started, I think, low 3100s, ended up pretty close to 3200. Now, as to the strategy success long-term, I would say that part of the success that I had with it definitely has to be the particular ELO bracket that I was in. I wasn't seeing a lot of fairy types, so running ABA weak to fairies felt like it could work out pretty well, and honestly, it did. As you can see, I didn't really encounter a whole lot of fairy types. As a matter of fact, I saw more Kofa than fairy types, which was kind of cool to see. But yeah, so all in all, I would say basically run a lead where you can try and play for switch advantage against a lot of things, and then run kind of a rock, paper, scissors alignment dependent backline is a viable strategy. I've seen some people run it with like a Alola Ninetales lead, some people run it with Shadow Dragonair lead. So overall, this is another variation of that kind of strategy, but as you can see, it did put in some pretty nice work. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.